Hey guys, Ryan with www.dronekits.us. This is our new quadcopter frame. We're going to have these available for sale in just a couple weeks, Thanksgiving 2014. So in this video I'm going to take you through assembling this frame. Got a bunch of clamps on there because the glue's still wet. This is going to be a 4-part series. We're going to have assembling the frame, we're going to have mounting the electronics, then we're going to have wiring up and soldering, and then for the 4th video we'll do setting up our copter control board, the CC3D board. Definitely check out our website, check out our Facebook page, and if you live in the Lansing area, Lansing, Michigan area, we're going to post on there whenever we go out flying. So if you want to come out, give one of these a try, you can definitely come and crash one of ours before you make the decision on whether or not it's for you. Thanks. Alright, for starters here, we're going to go over the different components that are included in the kit. We've got our bottom plate. You can tell the difference between the bottom plate and the top plate by the top plate has some extra holes and extra slots in it for mounting our copter control board. So here's our top plate. We've got our bottom plate, which does not have the extra holes in the back for the copter control board. We've got 4 of the motor booms, or 4 of the sticks. You're going to have 4 of the landing gear. We've got the 3 pieces for mounting our little copter control board and the receiver. Our copter control standoff, power distribution board, and 4 of the motor pods. We can set everything aside right now except for one of our booms and our bottom frame portion. Now if you look on this bottom frame portion, we have got 4 half-inch flat spots here, and what these are for is to assist in lining up our booms. So what we're going to do, so we know where to glue, is we are going to start by taking one of our booms, lining it up between 2 of our half-inch alignment flat spots, and we are going to draw a couple lines. I'm going to do the same thing going the other direction. And now what this gives us is this is going to show us where our booms are going to rest and where we need to glue to. The booms are going to come all the way back to, I think you can see it on here, the little burn marks. So what we want to do is we want to glue everything right in there. So we're going to apply glue, and we're going to clamp our arms down. We'll do that to all 4, and then we should be good to go. Okay, what we're going to need for this step is going to be our 4 booms, our bottom plate, and then glue of choice. You can use the Gorilla foaming glue. You could use some sort of an epoxy that you mix up, or just a regular wood glue that does not foam. That's what I'm going to use. I've got plenty of time here, so I'm going to actually use the non-foaming Gorilla glue, clamp it, leave it overnight, and then I will continue on tomorrow. If you're in a little bit of a hurry and you don't want to wait for as long, then you can use like a 5-minute epoxy. Something like that will keep you going to where you can keep on working, and you don't have to leave these things clamped for so long. So I'm going to have my booms, my bottom plate, my glue, and then about 8 of these little clamps to put everything together. We're going to apply glue from our burn marks out to the edge of the board. And then we can use the lines on here to keep our boom straight. I suppose you could wing it and just eyeball this, but then you probably won't have a very straight quadcopter. So we're going to take our first boom, bring it back to our burn mark, keep it centered within inside of our lines that we drew. And then I'm going to put a couple clamps on it. Same thing moving on to the second boom. And there we've got it. I've got 4 booms. The end of each boom I've brought to stopping at the little burn mark that we left in there, and they're all centered inside of the lines that I drew. So I can leave that sitting overnight. We'll come back to it tomorrow. Okay, for this next step we're going to need some epoxy, our CC3D standoff, our CC3D board, something to mix the epoxy in, a clamp, something to mix the epoxy with, and our top board. So what I'm going to do, first we will figure out the direction that this is going to have to sit. What we want to do is take our CC3D board, fit it onto our standoff, and you can see on the CC3D board there is a small arrow pointing which direction the board needs to sit when it's in flight. Now this is the front of our board, this is the back where the CC3D board is going to mount. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the CC3D board off and then just draw an arrow on this so I know which direction this needs to sit. So we're going to glue this to that right there. The other thing you'll need for this step is 4 paper clips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some epoxy. The other thing you might want to do for this step is if there's a side to this board that you like better than the other, so if there's grains or something on here that looks better and that's the side you want facing up, go ahead and just decide if there's a better side. If there's a better side, we'll make that the top. This one looks like it's pretty even on both sides. I don't see any odd grains or any knots or anything like that. So I'm going to mix up my epoxy, and then I'm going to set this board here on our main board, line up the holes, and then I'm just going to trace around so I know where to apply the glue. So now that I've got this section traced out, I know that everything in here I need to apply epoxy. Now what we're going to use these paper clips for is to line up the holes. So I'll apply my epoxy, and then I'm going to use these paper clips in all 4 holes so that I make sure that everything's lined up good. The weakest part of that standoff is where the screws go through and have to pass through into that bottom board. So you want to make sure that you get plenty of epoxy in over on like the little ears. Alright, now I'm going to pay attention to my arrow, make sure that that's facing forward. Pop that down into place. Now I'm going to take my 4 paper clips, stick those through, that way I've got everything all lined up, and then I'm going to take my clamp and clamp it. Now I'm using a 5-minute epoxy, and with the 5-minute epoxy, you've got 5 minutes of working time, so that means you got 5 minutes to be able to spread everything around, and then it says to leave it clamped for 30 minutes. Again, even though it's 5-minute epoxy, you probably got an hour or 2 before that is rock solid and becomes really, really hard. But there, we're ready to go on to the next step. Alright, for this next step, we're going to need the frame that we've already clamped up and glued together with the booms. We're going to need our 4 motor pods, and then for this step I'm going to use the foaming polyurethane Gorilla Glue. Doesn't really matter what glue you use on any of these steps. I'm just going through, and I used epoxy for the CC3D board, I used the regular wood glue, I'm going to use this polyurethane glue so you can sort of see what the differences are between all of them and make a decision on how you want to build yours. I can remove the clamps here. This sat overnight. And I'll show you a little bit to think about when you are gluing up yours. Here you can see on this arm right here, I wiped that up. After I got done gluing, I made sure that there wasn't any excess. On this one here, I left it just to show what the difference is, how much of a cleaner build you can make just by wiping up some of the excess when you get all done. This is going to get covered, so it's not a huge deal right here, but just something to think about as you're gluing everything up. Now this polyurethane glue, this stuff foams up and drips quite a bit. So the other thing I'm going to have here are 4, I took a paper towel and cut up 4 small pieces to lay underneath each one. That way if there's any gluing or dripping or anything, it's not going to end up on my workbench here. So first step, we're going to take one of these motor pods. If you look, there's a flat spot here at the top and a flat spot at the bottom. Those are 1/2 inch, so you can line those up, and that'll help to keep everything really, really straight on these booms here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up, make sure I'm flush with the end, make sure that I'm even up here, and I'm going to take a pencil, and I'm just going to mark the end. Now I know how much glue to put down right through here. Take some of my Gorilla polyurethane glue. Smear it on the boom there. Now I'm going to take my motor pod. Make sure I've got everything lined up. Use a couple clamps to put it in place, to hold it in place, and I'm going to put a paper towel underneath it so that anything that drips ends up on the paper towel and on my workbench. all you got to do is go through and do that to all 4 of the other booms, and we'll be ready for the next step. Hey, alright, well, we let this sit overnight, and now we can remove our clamps. We're going to save 4 of them for the next step. So I'm going to hold on to 4 of these clamps. And here you can see, I didn't have any drip on any of my paper towels, but you can see what I was talking about with the way that it sort of foams up. Again, ours ended up not being too bad, but it's not the, I guess, not the prettiest joint. So whenever I'm using the polyurethane Gorilla Glue, I would either clean that up with a Dremel tool afterwards, or if it's something like this where it's going to be sitting on the underside, I'm not too worried about it. So for the next step, we are going to need 4 of the zip ties. We are going to need 4 of our speed control shelves, and then our 4 landing gear pods. To start off for the landing gear, what I'm going to do is I am actually going to have all of my landing gear. You have to think about where you want it to sit. I guess I'll try to show this. So here we're viewing the back of the quad. You can sort of either have these all sitting in one side. What you don't want to do is have it sit something like that, where it's all staggered. Or I guess maybe you want to be artistic and you do want it to sit like that. But the way I'm going to have mine sit is if I'm looking from the rear of the quad, I'm going to have my two landing gears in this position. If I'm looking at the front of the quad, I'm going to have my 2 landing gear in that position. So again, it's just personal preference. What we'll start off with, I'm going to put my landing gear in that first position, and then I am just going to go through and mark with a pencil again, so I know where to apply my glue. I know that everything in there gets glued. I'm going to go ahead and do that for all 4 of the pods. On the back here. For this one, I'm going to use my Gorilla Glue polyurethane glue again. Put the glue on the arm. Take my landing gear piece, put it in a position, and now instead of clamping it, I'm actually going to use my zip tie here. Hold that back in position. Pull this nice and tight. And there we go. Okay, as you can see, I've got all 4 of my landing gear on, and I've snipped the zip ties. So now we are ready for our electronic speed control shelf. Now where I'm going to mount these, where you mount yours is probably going to depend on which motors you're using. If you're using our motors, then they're going to have the 15 centimeter or 150 millimeter long motor leads, which will get you the full distance that you're going to need. So it's not going to matter so much where you put them in here. If you're using something with shorter motor leads, or if you're using some motors you already have, you may have to situate this back a little further You can mount it on the side. You can really put it wherever you'd like, just depending on how you want your speed controls to go. But again, if you're using arm motors and speed controls, where I'm going to mount mine is right over here to sort of add some support to my landing gear. So what I'm going to do with this, we're going to mark this the same way that we did with the pencil on the other ones. So I'm actually going to take my electronic speed control shelf and bring it right up to where my zip tie comes in. So then for that, I'll put a couple marks on my arm here. Take the shelf away. So now you can see I want to glue everything right in there. So we've got the glue. Take my shelf, put it into position, and just sort of eyeball it to try to get it as even across there, to get it centered up on my boom. And then I'm going to take my clamp, and again, there we go. Do it to the other three, and we're ready to keep moving. Okay, as you can see, I've got all 4 of them on there. Everything's clamped. I'm ready to push this one off to the side, and we will let the glue dry on that. Again, put your paper towels underneath where the Gorilla Glue is, especially if it's on something important that you're a little worried about getting any glue, because that Gorilla Glue, it'll foam up and drip a bit. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our top plate. We are going to need some something to mix some epoxy in, or epoxy, and then these pieces right here. What this is right here we're going to mount our control board. We can remove this clamp. So this is where our copter control CC3D board is going to go. And then these 2 pieces are going to go in here with our little slots on the top. Then this shelf is for mounting our receiver. Now this shelf we're not going to glue on. This shelf that's what these slots are for, so we can zip tie the shelf on. This will allow us to be able to pop this off with the receiver on it and still be able to get to where our copter control board is for plugging in wires. If we ever had to remove it, it's a little bit easier to get to. So for starters, we will take out our paper clips. If the glue is dried and these are a little stuck, it should be fine if you just wiggle them back and forth, spin them a little bit, and then you should be able to pull these out. If you've got one with a lot of glue or a lot of epoxy that built up on the underside, cut it with your snips, and that should be less to pull out. If I had been thinking, I would have pulled these out before all the epoxy got rock hard. Okay, so we got that out of there. Now I'm going to mix up my epoxy. For this, when you're mixing up the epoxy, what you want to make sure is that you've got equal parts of the hardener and the resin. There's going to be 2 different portions of it, whether it comes in a container like this, or it comes in 2 separate bottles. But what you want to do is make sure that you get 2 equal portions, and then you want to make sure that you get it mixed up real good. So that might be 20-30 seconds of mixing it, but you want it to get that nice milky color and make sure that everything's mixed in. The reason I'm using the epoxy for the CC3D and also for this shelf on top is because I'm going to paint this, and I think that the epoxy, the way that the glue sort of sets up and the way that it sort of slants or slopes towards the wood, it just leaves the best looking, I guess the best looking. If you're going to have some glue that is out there on top, then I think the epoxy looks the best once it's painted up. It's less, I guess, chunky. It seems to flow even and leaves a nice slope to whatever you've glued. So I'm going to take some of this epoxy and just put it in the hole here and a little bit overlapping. Put my 2 tray pieces in. I want to put my tray on top here because that'll help keep these straight while the epoxy sets up. And then I'm going to add just a little bit more epoxy along this seam right here. Right in there. I'm going to do the same thing over to that side, and then I'm going to set this side and let it set up. Now this step right here, these parts aren't included in the kit, but it's something easy that you can go and pick up from a hardware store or even a Walmart or any store. And this is just a neat little trick for if you're new to quads, if you're starting out, and you maybe have a little bit of trouble with the orientation of it. One of the things that's tricky about these is it's sort of tough to see which direction it's going. So it's nice to have something out in the nose or something that sort of points in the correct direction. So what we're going to do is this is just some square dowel. It's a 1/4 inch square dowel. Again, you can pick it up from Walmart, Meijer, anywhere. And then this, you can use a ping pong ball. This is actually like a practice golf ball. This is drilled out to 5/16. Had to double check my drill bit there. So this is drilled out to 5/16, and at 5/16, now it will sort of a snug fit, but it does fit over my square dowel. So I've got something like this, and I'm probably going to add some hot glue or something to the either side of that just to help hold it into position. The next thing that you're going to have to do is measure the distance between these 2 front arms, and it's going to be pretty close to, I think, 16 1/4. Yeah, 16 1/2, 16 1/4. Anything in there, something that you can just get that span of those far 2 arms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I've got this cut to 16 1/4. Now, if you look at the front of the quad, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp this right up underneath and glue it in place. So now, as this is flying around, we're going to have this up front as the nose. So if we're flying at you, and this is pitched down, or it's pitched up, or if it's going left or right, it's a lot easier to tell which direction this quad is going with something like that. So, what I'm going to do for the next step, flip this upside down, sort of see where this is going to get mounted. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my Gorilla Glue, put it on the ends here. Stick in place. And then use 2 more clamps to hold this in place. So there you go, an easy way of telling which direction the quad's going. Alright, before all the other glue sets up, we're actually still ready. We can continue working, and we're ready to move on to the very last step, which is putting our top board on. For this, all we're going to do is, you can see there's enough holes and little slots and stuff on there. We're just going to eyeball and line everything up. Get it to where everything looks good. Then we're going to take our pencil and we're going to mark how far that board comes out on all of the arms. You'll see here. So now I know that I need to glue everything in here. So for this one, I'm going to use the Gorilla Glue again. We're going to need 4 clamps. So you might have to wait for everything else to cure if you're short on clamps. But if you head down to Harbor Freight, or I know Menards has like a little package of those clamps for like $5 for like 20 of them. So you don't need anything. We're not holding anything together that requires a whole lot of strength. So you can go with a really, really small 99-cent or 59-cent clamps. So I've got glue on all my arms. I drop my top plate into position here. Line everything up. I'll take my 4 clamps. And there we go. Once this all finishes drying and everything cures up, and that's it. We'll be on to the next video and ready to start mounting our electronics.